Hey there, listeners. Welcome to Hines On Air, your weekly dose of inspiration, motivation, and real-life entrepreneurial stories. I'm Matt Hines, your host, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey. From building a successful law firm to venturing into other industries like real estate and social media, I've experienced both the triumphs and the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. I've learned firsthand the importance of resilience, adaptability, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. On Hines On Air, we're diving deep into the world of business, law, and personal growth. Join me as I chat with incredible guests who have faced adversity, defied expectations, and achieved extraordinary success. We'll discuss their strategies, their mindset, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply someone looking for a little inspiration, Hines On Air is for you. Remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review whenever you listen to podcasts. Your support helps us reach more people and continue sharing these incredible stories. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody. Matt Hines back at you with another Hines On Air. Look, I have not been more excited about a guest before than I am today because she has done it all. She's got a traumatic history starting out in childhood, but then throughout her life, she's achieved so many goals and dreams. She is a professional actor. I got to read it because there's just too much to remember. A professional actor, spokesperson, writer, author, mentor, and speaker. I think I read also on your website, you speak 8 languages. Is that right?
Oh, no.
No?
That's
I saw. And before we get too far, this is Walker Brandt. Please welcome Walker Brandt to the show. I was about to get. I thought it said there's 8 dialects, and I assumed that was 8 languages. No.
No, you must be looking at accents. Accents.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's still impressive.
Yes, I used a lot of accents in my work, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's probably what it is.
Where was WalkerBrandt.com? Is that your acting website?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's funny. Right. I better go make sure that it hasn't been hacked and nobody. I'm to put my VA on that. It's not saying that I speak 8 languages.
It doesn't. I translated that into languages from dialect. So.
Oh no!
Anyway,
from the time I've spent abroad, I probably could have had I been a little more skilled in that arena. I'm a high functioning dyslexic, so learning another language is like some kind of fine tuned torture for somebody like me.
Yep.
Although I have an ear and I can pick up dialects really quick and I can pick up accents really quick. But I remember when I was living in Germany, working on a series there, and the producer's like, you want to learn the language? And I thought, well, yeah, this might be fun to try. I have never experienced a more phonetically different, denser language than German. And I said, you know what? I dove in a little bit, and I think that it might just become a little overwhelming to do that and this series at the same time. I think I'm going to let this one go.
Hey, well, listen, it's been about 6 years now. My wife's from Ecuador, so she's native Spanish. And so I have a law firm, and we mainly work with the Hispanic community. So I'm like, well, I need to learn Spanish. 6 years later, after 2 tutors, all kind of books, all kinds of courses, nothing. I mean, I may have like 3% of it. It's tough. I'm like, what is wrong with me? It just won't stick.
It is exactly. It is really tough. And Rosetta Stone, did you do that? Did you do the whole?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, like hardcore. I had a stack of cards. I was all about it. No, hadn't stuck.
I know. And there's a point where you just say, this is not settling in because your brain is letting you know you've got enough in here and your focus and your interest level in these other things is higher. So it might be wiser to hire somebody else to deal with that part of your life. And in your case, you're married to somebody who can help you in that part of your life. Thank God, because we can't force our minds to grab something. Our minds resist and we try, but it just is an uphill grind. And
it was tougher than I thought. I'm like, all these little kids running around me speaking Spanish. I'm like, well, it can't be too difficult. Well, I don't know. This old brain of mine just wasn't moving at the right speed.
And you just hit the nail on the head. It's much easier to learn a new language when we're young.
That's right.
Definitely.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Can you give us a little brief history of It's always exciting to me to hear with somebody has sort of a tough beginning and they overcome all that. Can you give us a little summary of what life was like back then?
Absolutely. Well, it is an interesting journey. Whenever I talk about my life, it feels like I'm talking about so many lives because they're such capsules of intensity and stages that are so clearly defined as I was shifting from one to the next, opening these doors into the unknown and moving forward despite the terror that can give us, especially being a child who was in a state of fear and terror on the daily. I grew up in a family that alcoholism, drug abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, there really isn't an abuse that didn't exist in the family, in our family. And it was just the way it was. So much so that many people in our family didn't really recognize it as being not the norm. There wasn't a lot of talk at that time. Not that I'm, ancient, but most of us don't realize that, women, we couldn't even have a checking account without our husband co-signing until the 60s. And women are just really starting to speak out and bring a balance to our own paradigm and the way that most societies in the world have been built on a masculine paradigm. So there has been a suppression of, what is accepted as normal and what is actually healthy and normal. So for me as a kid growing up, there wasn't a lot of discussion that, hey, this is not okay, except for me. Something inside of me from a very early age, from the point of being able to speak, said, no, this is wrong. This is not okay. And I spoke up. I was compelled to say, this is not okay. Didn't know exactly why, outside of the pain that I was being put in from the abuse from my parents. But I knew there was something even deeper than the physical pain I experienced. There was something wrong with the way that these people shared time together and space together. This thing called love that we were supposed to have for one another didn't exist in a healthy way. It wasn't a thread that held us together. It was something that we knew existed, something I innately had a sense, especially when out in nature, because I could see it in the harmony of nature. There was something beautiful there I knew it was connected to. I felt safer there than in my own home. There was this love I felt coming towards me from just the energy of that space, this connected, welcome safety. And there's so much about feeling safe to receive love. And when we don't feel safe, it makes it really hard to receive love. So finding and creating that place where we can first feel safe is critical. And I didn't realize that I was doing that as a kid on my own instinctually. How I did that is I left as a tiny kid, as a child. I would leave home at 5 and go out and play, and I'd be gone all day long. My mom made sure we were really capable because we had to be. She was she had issues. She was an alcoholic. She had migraines, and she'd sleep most of the day. So we were.
Was it you by yourself, or did you have brothers and sisters?
I had an older sister for the first 10 years, and then my mom remarried when I was 3, and then at 10, my 2 twin little sisters came into the picture.
Okay.
My stepfather. So there were 4 girls, and but for the first 10 years, it was my sister and I.
Got it.
So something drew me to nature, and that's where I felt that feeling of safety. And from that feeling of safety, I was able to expand inside instead of be in contraction 24/7, which is where I was. I lived in contraction as a child. I lived in contraction in my home, and I lived in contraction in school because I didn't feel safe around people. People were...
When you say I lived in contraction, you mean like introverting?
Totally.
Just keep it here. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, very much an introvert. I isolated myself. I don't know if I've even spoken about this story online before or out loud outside of my family, but one of the things I did as a little girl in school was I built a fortress, and thankfully my teachers allowed me to do this. Well, they couldn't really stop me, but they allowed me to do this because it was clear that this child had, had been going through some issues and definitely had a family problem. But when I was in school in the 70s, teachers really didn't know what to do. There really wasn't there weren't a lot of resources available. And at my desk at school, I would grab a bunch of books in the classroom. There were always stacks of books, and I'd stack them up on the sides of my desk. And I created a little fortress that I would lean inside of so I couldn't see anyone and nobody could see me. And there'd be a little space where I could see the teacher. And it was my safe spot. I had to create safety wherever I went. And I remember the letters that, the notes that would go home to my mom that my mom gave me I left home as a kid. Once we started speaking again, she handed me these letters, from my teachers. And, she's doing this and she's doing that and can't stop her. She just left the classroom today. And I would go out. I would leave the classroom and I would go out to the other end of the field by myself, and I would talk to God, and I'd have conversations. Why do I have to be here? I don't want to be here. I just felt unsafe around people because people were dangerous to me. Nature was not. And when you're developing as a child, you can't help but go towards safety. So that was my beginning. And that was a very clear period of time that lasted until 9 years old. I was so incredibly introverted and private. I didn't want anyone really around me. It was hard to have friends. I had friends, but it was very few friends because I wasn't comfortable. And it's important. Comfort is an important thing for a child to feel accepted as you are. But when you have a family that isn't looking into their dysfunction, not doing anything about it, it becomes an environment of just constant suppression. And when a child is born into that, it's like a blade of grass trying to push through cement. It's the parallel that comes to my mind because you're pushing so hard to grow and seek light for your own health, your own right to life. And there's so much pressure on you coming from all sides that you can't understand, you can't comprehend, but it's pushing you inside instead of allowing you to expand and open to the world, which is your reason for being here. We're here to grow and to expand, not to contract. So at 9, we moved from this tiny little place in Santa Barbara called Painted Cave, which was a very isolated community as well up in the mountains. We moved to Central California, and I lasted there for about 3.5 years. I started running away at 13 and consistently running away 13, 14, and left permanently at 15 and a half. And moved to Southern California and became emancipated at 16. And I was on the street and living with a friend that I went to a private school, which was essentially, it was I ran away and I was in a halfway house at 13 turning 14 after a violent episode with my stepdad. And I wouldn't go home. And wouldn't go live with my parents. I couldn't see my stepdad. It was so traumatic that my mind blocked him out, which is a break in it's a psychotic break is what it's called. The word psychotic is such a harsh word and little understood, but it's a point. There's many different kinds, but what your brain will do when you go through something so incredibly traumatic is it will literally not allow you to see somebody or something that is too overwhelming to your mind. The terror is so overwhelming that your mind will block it out. And that's what happened to me. I couldn't see my stepdad for a very long time. It was almost a year. And then I started singing in the corner of I was weird. I started singing my peripheral. I didn't feel safe living in that home and I wouldn't go back. So it was a protective custody environment where I said, I'm not living at this home. And the choice I was given, my parents were given, was there's a school that's essentially for kids that have issues. There really wasn't an advocacy for children. If you were a runaway, you were the problem back then. You weren't, it was not something that the environment didn't exist to be an advocate of a kid like it does now. It's the best way, I didn't articulate that very well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But you understand what I'm saying. So it has, that arena has grown so much in my lifetime that it's comforting to know that kids have support. I was such a strong personality and such a warrior against wrongdoing for my own self and for others that I just was, you are not doing this to me. I am not, even though I had a concussion, I was just a mess. I was not going to go back. You could not make me go back. Remember the sheriff, my parents, the lady that had the halfway house, the meeting we had, and me laying essentially at 14, laying down the law about what I was going to do. And I just simply said to the sheriff, you bring me back, I'm going to run away again. I'm not living in that home. And they didn't. Fortunately, my parents went along with their recommendation, and I went up to this school. And most of the kids from the school were from LA, and they were either kids that were hyperactivity disorder, they came from dysfunctional homes, they were gang intervention. There were all different kinds, kids from extraordinarily wealthy homes, but the parents were, they were just not existent. They weren't around for the kids, and the kids were, in trouble emotionally. So it was essentially a school for misfit, children is what it was sort of labeled as. And I went there for a year, which had a bunch of issues in and of itself. But it was safer than being at home. And I was in therapy every day there. I had counselors. They were fantastic. And they helped me heal and be able to see my stepdad again and go through the process of healing the trauma I'd been through. And enough to try and go home after at 15. And that lasted about 6 months. And it started to get violent again. And I left. Called my friend from that school who lived in LA, and I said, can you please come get me? I'm leaving. And that was it.
That's the emancipation process, right? That's how it began?
Emancipation process, yes.
That's a legal thing with the courts?
Yep.
Did you hire an attorney and say, I am done? Or
yes,
how does that work?
You go to court, and I had a sponsor. My friend that brought me to LA happened to be one of the kids that went to the school. Her parents were trying to keep her out of gangs. And she had gotten into some really dangerous gangs, and she was still connected to those gangs, unfortunately. And when I moved in with her, there was a drive-by shooting with bullets flying, and it was terrifying.
Jeez.
So that was my introduction to Van Nuys, to the LA basin, and it was like, okay, I'm not staying here. And fortunately, I had met a friend of hers who was a wonderful human being, and his family. And she had gone to high school with him, and his mother, something in her heart just opened to me. She became my advocate, and she invited me to live in their home. And I did. He wanted me to live with them. It was safer, and we became really good friends. And they invited me to live in their home, and they're angels to me, because if they hadn't, I don't know what my life would have been like. I really have no idea. It just would not have been likely what it what it ended up being, which wasn't the easiest path, but it definitely was safer than where I was. And she was just such an angel to advocate for me, and then to inform me of this opportunity to be emancipated. Well, my parents had to agree to it because California just wasn't. No laws existed in our country that were advocate of the child before the parent at this time. They put the child through a lot to determine their own, to self-determine, to even be safe from a dysfunctional environment. They wanted you to be with one or the other parent. And one was my stepdad, who was never safe. And the other was my mother, who was never safe. Even though she was my biological mother, she just wasn't a safe person to be with. And there just wasn't enough for kids to have their own voice. But she was ahead of the game. My friend's mom was ahead of the game, and she felt that I had a right to be safe at the very least. And she pushed and pushed for my parents to give me that. And I went through an awful experience with the first engagement with my parents, with her. My parents called the police, and they came and took me away to another halfway house in LA, which was terrifying. And fortunately, I was able to run from that one. And
they didn't ever. It seems like the police would investigate your parents at some point. Did that never happen?
They wouldn't investigate my parents. Well, they sat with my parents, but there wasn't any deep investigation into my parents. And part of the reason being is my stepdad was really wealthy, and he had position in the community. And it was just a time. Not only that, it was that plays a part. And I think we're all seeing how now, especially, how organizations can be corrupted by money. And I mean, money is a great tool, but when people are not rooted in integrity and rooted in basic fundamental protections and honesty, there is a thread of accepting abuse to children and to women that hasn't been disrupted enough, which is exactly the era I grew up in. It hadn't been disrupted enough. And I was a disruptor, but there wasn't enough of me at that time to really disrupt. And in the community we lived in, they weren't going to be on my side before they were going to be on my parents. It just was the way it is. Now, a little bit different, because now we've got tech, we've got phones, we've got ways to show what's happening. Because this is, to digress for a second, go back to my young childhood and my mother's side of the family, which has helped me have so much more compassion for my parents, is realizing the world, seeing the world, investigating and understanding the world she grew up in. There is a period of time in our society where what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. That was an unwritten law and rule. Men were allowed to beat their wives. They weren't prosecuted. They were not held consequential. They had no consequences. You could beat your wife and it was okay. Now you are going to have consequences. You are not allowed to beat a woman without a consequence. In my childhood, my grandfather beat my grandmother on the daily. And his beatings killed her, and he was never prosecuted. Again, standing in the community, again, an era where you then were allowed to get away with it. They were allowed to beat women. They were allowed to throw them around the room, and that's what happened to my grandmother. And she hit her head on the mantle, and she had an aneurysm, and she died. And she was beaten on the daily. I was there as a child many times when my grandfather beat my grandmother, when my grandfather went after my uncles, who were younger and still living in the home when I was a child. I saw a lot of absolutely vicious violence from multiple generations in my family, from grandparents, uncles, and it just wasn't as you say, investigated. There was just no support for the women. And so the
Right.
women in my family learned to live through it, within it, which all the children, they carried it in that way. And when you carry something like that, what you will inevitably do is just hand it off to your child to carry with you.
That's right.
You
That's
don't
right.
change anything. And for me, that was not going to be my story. And that was not going to be my story from a young age, Matt. I remember at 3 saying to my mom, "You're sad, you're upset." Her saying, "I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. Stop it." That was just her way. And that's what all the women did. But I
just deny, huh?
Yeah, deny. And that is setting the next generation up for the lie and to carry that burden and or fall into the same traps that the generations prior, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, self-abuse. And I've watched all my siblings go through all of that. And I went through some of it too. My abuse period, my alcohol and drug abuse period was definitely, it was pre-20. Thankfully, I went through it at a young age. I was in so much pain.
Right.
Even as running away, I fell into that, moments and periods where I experimented with drugs, trying to tune myself out, trying to shut it down like my family did, but it never stuck with me by the grace of God. There was something, that connection, as I just said, it's the connection that I forged as a little girl and that made a deep groove in me in nature. And I kept going back to that connection. It would pull me out in those moments where I felt like I just wanted to end it all. When I tried to commit suicide several times. The first time seriously at 14 when I left home. 14 with alcohol, and then 15 and a half when I left home. That day before was a suicide attempt. And I heard a voice in my head that said, "Don't leave or you'll die here."
Yeah.
And I did. And I listened. And that moment of listening to that voice changed my life. And that voice, when that voice speaks loudly in me, Matt, I listen.
Right.
I listen because that voice has never steered me wrong. So, I was emancipated. I enrolled myself in college, started studying child development at 17, and was approached by a photographer and thought he was a pedophile. Essentially told him to bugger off because that was not something I ever thought I could do. It certainly wasn't on my radar, and I thought anybody who wants to take pictures of young girls has got to have something wrong with them. That's how my mind was. It's such protection at that point. And but he lived in the neighborhood, and neighbors said that he was legit. And my friend's mom, who said, I think he's a nice person, and you might want to consider maybe investigating it. And I said, okay, I will, as long as my friend's sister comes with me, and she has to be photographed with me. We're going to be together. And that was the beginning of the modeling career, which I grew up thinking I was ugly. I grew up being told I was ugly. It just wasn't on my radar to think that I had anything that could have been remotely desirable for an actor either, but for a model for sure. So the whole thing was really weird to me for the longest time. It took me a while to get comfortable with people say, you're attractive and you're pretty. I would get this look on my face. And then I started, learning that, okay, so I have some traits like some of these people, and I can do this. And because I had a really practiced imagination, when I would go out as a little girl in nature, I was creating whole worlds for myself. safe worlds, fun worlds. I was an adventurer in nature. I was all these different characters and roles, and created these worlds for me. And it lifted the weight that I felt and the pain and the sorrow that I was in. So I had been using my imagination very specifically for a long, long time. And so I started using it in that world. So whenever I would be at a shoot, I would create a character for it. And it made me feel more comfortable having people staring at me, clicking this thing and taking pictures. So I create a character. And that's inevitably what ended up leading me into acting.
I was about to say, that sounds like a perfect segue or a perfect stepping place into acting if you're creating the stories and all.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I never thought about being an actor. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I definitely shared that before. I loved animals. I trained horses. I would always find dogs or horses wherever we were that I could ride or I could help, take care of or walk. I was always out and about as a little girl. I created my first little business at 7, was walking other people's dogs. And I was always creating ways for me to make money, for me to have my independence, extremely independent. I wanted to have my own choices. And my parents had that dysfunction of control, which comes from any kind of trauma people go through. That tends to be a thread in the family, is over control, over dominance, bullying, all of that existed. So we weren't allowed to make any choices for ourselves. Every stitch of clothing, everything was picked by our parents. And when you're a kid, you want to kind of fit in. You don't want to not fit in. And my mom made our clothes during a period of time, so we never fitted. And I was, I grew and I was tall and I had the long, lanky body and no pants fit me. So my mom would literally sew these 2.5-inch pieces of lace or some kind of fabric, a piece of a sheet or something to make it long. And it was horrifying as a kid, because you go to school and you see all these kids wearing similar clothes and you're the one that's standing out in a costume. And it's just, I need that on top of everything else that's going on in here. So it was
wow.
such a crazy experience, but it forced me to be resilient. It forced, I was just an oddball in many ways and in my own isolation. But so I had this desire to have my own money because I knew it would give me choice and have my independence. So that was going on from a really young age. And that drove me to obviously be independent, to be emancipated, to get my driver's license at 15 and a half, to actually have on the day on my birthday, go down to the DMV and have my actual license. All these things that kids resist now, I was first in line. Give me my autonomy. Let me self-determine. Let me write my own story. Let me create something different. And not afraid at the same time of the unknown, which is, I think, something that we've lost touch with. It's so much of what we begin in that we love as children. It's the very thing we wake up and run toward every single day. We don't know diddly about diddly, yet we wake up and we want to know. We want to know. We want to run out there, whether we can walk or not, whether we can talk or not. We can't wait to be in the unknown. And there's something in the way that our societies have been formed that conditions.
And you didn't have to fear failure like someone else who's had it, silver spoon their whole life. You'd seen the worst. So you're like, I can survive anything. I don't know if that was your opinion at the time, but it would seem that, somebody who's always had it, always been given the best circumstances, they would be afraid of failure because they don't want to lose it or disappoint people. You probably didn't have that as much.
I definitely don't think I had that as much. But you know what? I don't think it was even the language of failure. I don't think I ever said, I've been through the worst of it, and nothing can. That wasn't really in my consciousness. I just wasn't afraid to move towards the unknown because where I came from wasn't as safe as what I didn't know. What I knew was not as safe as what I didn't know. And that I think it's more about the safety thing, not even if there's an association of safety with maybe having, like you said, a silver spoon. I know people, though, that have come from what they consider, what society considers a normal childhood. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people where they're like, I didn't go through anything like you went through, but I relate to how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been such an interest and curiosity of mine, because I really don't think that we're very far away from each other when it comes to the actual abuses that we may have lived through and the circumstances that we grow in, but it's the way that we're made up as a person. Somebody who may have grown up in a silver spoon environment but didn't have their parents show enough interest in them could have
Right.
felt just as, terrified, and their mind could have associated that lack of interest with a level of abuse, and the reaction could be similar to mine just because of the way they're made. So I've learned in my life to not over the years, to just not see things from that perspective of, when I look at a child that's been, I've talked to children who are sex trafficking survivors, who are amazing, bright lights, and what they have lived through, it just blows my mind. For me, how can they? And they are this light. They have something in their spirit that has been able to come out of that. And then I've spoken to people who haven't had a single moment of physical abuse, and they have tried to end their lives multiple times because of the way that they have been, like a friend of mine says, and I love this, conditioned to believe how the world is around them, is locking into a belief and a structure that's so narrow and doesn't allow them, again, to expand, that they contract into this belief pattern that makes them feel hopeless. And that, to me, is more dangerous than a lot of the physical abuses that we can go through in our lives, is how we can be conditioned to believe something that destroys hope and destroys our ability to see ourselves as these students of life that are allowed to expand and grow and make mistakes and pick ourselves up and go out and learn from that, and not feel it as the ultimate failure, but as part of this experience. Is these words like, it's a failure. I was locked into it for a while myself, Matt. I was afraid to tell anyone about my story. I didn't share my story until 2020.
Wow.
I went through building all this success in the industry as a person that I thought, peeking through, but my agents had no idea. My managers had no idea what I was dealing with on the daily, just to get myself into that environment and deal with that rejection, which is part of, the business. But as I was, growing and working through my issues, they had no idea about it, because I was afraid that if they knew, they'd think I was less capable than somebody out there. And I knew that I was just as capable as anyone else in the industry, because of what I had landed in, what I had worked on, how I had entered. I knew I belonged on these great projects because it's where I was. And I really believe where you find yourself, you're there because at that moment, that's where you belong. Because either it's a place of learning, it's a place where you're going to come out of and you're going to learn something, you're going to grow through it. All of it's temporary. Really important to realize that. It's temporary, even when it feels so permanent. Like your story about bankruptcy and what you had been through, when I was listening to that, and how you pulled yourself through it, and how you spoke about what it felt like at that moment, all that conditioning that you had of bankruptcy and being an attorney and, building something and, not being able to fulfill what you had built. that
No.
tells us all in our minds that we've done something wrong. Well, what if you flip that and are able in that moment to go, okay, I didn't see this. Now I do. What's my next door so that I can go through this? Is it going to be something I recognize? If it's something I recognize, it's probably going to freak me out because it's not going to be if it's not the success line that I know and it's the other, it's going to freak me out because all the information I have there is going to tell me a story that is going to freak me out, make me feel like I'm not living up to what I should know or what I should have done. If we can let ourselves not do that for a moment and see where we are, and this happens to me all the time. I've been going through my own version of this in the last 4 years through the pandemic because I'm somebody who didn't get the vaccination.
Me neither.
So I was certainly not able to work in my industry.
And you had a lot of pressure in California. I mean, they were coming down hard.
They were coming down hard.
Georgia, we were luckier.
In my industry, they were coming down hard. There were people that literally said they should die if you haven't. There were like people in my industry that I once respected telling people that they should, be jailed or die because we were the problem. They didn't know what I was living through in my life. They had no idea. They didn't know me enough to say that. I've always been a person that believes in our own personal autonomy, especially when it comes to the body that we inhabit. We have that right. And so I wasn't able to work in my industry because I was essentially, anyone who made the choice I made was on a list. And it's just starting there's just the awareness is finally happening.
That's right. And I think it's about to get a whole lot better. RFK got confirmed today. I don't know if you follow that one at all. Huge.
I'm a huge RFK fan. I've been following RFK for a long, 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 long time. So I'm an independent, and he's always been, somebody that he and Dr. McCullough, these are people that I've been watching, following, listening to, just researching long before the following, before social media, because I'm a preventative health person. I am I went to homeopathy school. I'm always learning. So I'm always in that. If I'm not working, I'm studying nutrition, herbology, preventative medicine. This is something that's always been a passion of mine. And I believe that it's all of our right to have autonomy, and that we all need of our own physical being, and we all need to be more proactive, and we all need to recognize, follow the money and what pharma, their intention is in Monsanto and these organizations, which they've been on my radar for decades. And it's important for us to be proactive. I'm going to say it again. We need to wake up and not be apathetic and be our own advocate about our own health and information. To wake up to the truth that America has its own form of propaganda is huge for Americans. I think we are waking up in a big way from the apathy of pursuing our own interests, which is important to be able to pursue your own interest. But in a bubble, it creates a giant space for corruption.
Yeah, it does.
And we're waking up to that. And I think it's great that we're waking up and that we are shining the light and exposing, because it's kind of a giant thing of what I've always believed in my whole life. I've always believed in shining the light on darkness. And I did that as a child in my own family, and I was beaten and tortured for it. And I've been, ostracized from my industry because of making choices. Even when I first started, I refused to do nudity, and I was ostracized because of that. And I had it on my resume. Walker Brandt, SAG-AFTRA, does not do nudity. It was right at the very top.
And that made a big difference. Did that make a big difference from the jobs you got offered?
It was huge because I was offered script after script after script with all this nudity. I mean, my film and TV world where I was pursuing a lot of film and TV is the 90s. And that's the Harvey Weinstein 90s. And the industry was a lot different. And the kind of inappropriate behavior towards women like me, look like me, was unbelievable.
This game on, like no restrictions.
Oh,
whatever
no
you,
restrictions. It was nuts.
Oh.
And
wow.
for someone at my age and who was at the level of healing that I was at that point, which was essentially, not prepared for this, because even though my first audition, my first project was City Slickers, which was unbelievable with amazing, high integrity, incredible people, me being me, improvising with Billy Crystal and Bruno Kirby.
Wow.
It was just me going into a room and improvising with these amazing talents. And it was just felt right. And we just riffed and had a great time. And I had no idea what improvising was. I had no idea what acting was. It was just doing what I did is I was improvising my life. I had no idea, but that's what I was doing. That's what improv is. Improv, let me give you just a tiny little bit. And I'm just getting this parallel right now. And it's so freaking exciting when this happens, because one of the tenets of improvisation is yes and. You say yes no matter what. You keep the door open. What your partner comes at you with, the most important thing you do is you go forward with it. Yes. And you keep building on it. And that's what is so much fun. And that's what the audience loves. Whose line is it anyway? If you ever watch that, you'll see it's all yes and. Well, that's what I was doing in my life. I never really connected that. I never connected until just right now in this moment, Matt. And it's so exciting because that's what my life has been. It's been an improv and it's been yes and. And it's been open the door. Oh, if there's an opportunity. Yeah, I'm going to go toward that. Yeah, I'm going to go toward that.
Well, that's a testament to you, I think, Walker. Everybody couldn't do that. I wouldn't think.
I
could
do a yes and. Can.
Some people will withdraw or maybe no, maybe next time or whatever. That's you. That's impressive.
Well, maybe some of us are a little more risky. Yeah. I mean, I think that, I'm a little more risky than maybe the average person, but I'm not.
And that's just meant a compliment. I'm not trying to complicate it or anything. That's just a compliment to you. And I would imagine improvising with Billy Crystal has to be somewhat intimidating because he's hilarious. I'm sure he's brilliant in real life. Like to keep up with him and roll with it would be tough. Or may seem to be.
Well, you know what? There was nothing in me that would have ever thought to be intimidated with him because I was innocent.
Yeah.
Which is, I was not exposed to and didn't have that. And even now, I don't get starstruck because everybody poops, man.
That's right.
It's just, we're people, man. I just don't think that it really does us any good to put ourselves in that. Yeah, somebody is better at something than we are. When you meet somebody like, great guitar player. You meet the Rolling Stones, and you're like, yeah, that's Mick Jagger, and he's an incredible frontman singer, and you're blown away by what he can do that you can't do. But he's a person, and he's another person. He's got all his stuff going on, and that's how I've always felt when I meet people, anyone, and I've met a lot of celebrities, including Mick Jagger. But it's like, and it just makes me smile when I see somebody that's so awesome at what they do. Yeah, and Billy Crystal is, you're right, he's a genius. He's one of the funniest people on the planet, and he's quick-witted and I was in the room with him and we all were improvising off each other, and there was nothing that was just not normal, like we're having a conversation, because we all found ourselves in a place that we were all meant to be in.
Wow.
And that's
nice.
That was incredible. It was great. And when he looked at me, and I didn't realize it until people that were really freaked out about him, he goes, "You're funny. You made me laugh."
Wow, good.
Like, "You're funny." And just because we were just improvising, and I thought that was such a funny thing, because you know what it was, Matt, more than anything, it was that freedom And that safe, fun place where people when you walk into a room and people respect you because you're there, you're your time, you're a human being. They treat you with dignity and respect, and everybody's allowed to be who they are in that moment, the best of who we are in that moment. That's why it's so important to create that kind of space for people with dignity. Give them that dignity and respect. They're in the room with you because they belong there. They're there because they belong there. When you enter a room and you enter with that experience that we're all there and we all belong there together, it is such a freeing place. When you take away that, we give ourselves the grace to take away any labels and just be human beings in the room. We're in this room together. We all belong here. I think there'll be a lot more successful conferences and business meetings when there isn't that labeling going on where I'm the boss and you're the...
That's right. I think it says a lot about Billy Crystal. If he's going to create that type of energy and that sort of a space where all y'all can freely act and do what you want, it says a lot.
Yeah.
It's some arrogant jerk who thinks he's the best. It would probably be harder to have that freedom in that sort of a environment.
Exactly. And Billy and Ron and Bruno and the casting director, Pam Dixon, they all are responsible for creating that space for somebody who had not done a single thing but, commercials, a few commercials at that point. I hadn't done...
Wow.
Really,
that was your first movie?
That was my first audition.
Wow.
It was my...
Oh, you were improvising in the audition.
I was improvising in the audition, yes. And the reason I got it, to go like full circle on the modeling thing, was that they were looking for a girl that looked like a model that could act. That was like what they told my agent. And my agent called me and told me that. And my agent had nicknamed me the Chameleon because my modeling book, you turn the page and it was a completely different, it looked like a different person because like I said, I created roles for pictures. So I inhabited these, different people in my mind, and it showed in my pictures. It was obviously me, but there was like an energy about it. And so my agent nicknamed me the Chameleon in my book, and people started calling me that. It just didn't have the same person with different clothes on, right? And which is what a lot of books look like. And same looks, same poses, different clothes. And but me, it was like a different energy altogether. And so she called me and she said, "Walker, I just got a call from the casting director." I remember it so clearly. She woke me up in the morning, and they were looking for a model that can act. It came across my desk, and I'm thinking it's got to be you because I've always felt you were an actor, and you're like an actor stuck in a model's body. And I was like, "What is an actor?" And she goes, "Well, just go meet the casting director. They're actors. They're like people there. It's for a film, and Billy Crystal's in it." And I was like, "Oh, Billy Crystal! Oh, I used to watch him on, I think it was Soap, right?" And I was so excited because I think it was on Soap, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." And I was so okay. And so I went and I met with the casting director, and she was like, "I'm going to call you back to meet Billy," and called me back a week later. And I went in and had that experience. And we just played and hung out and did an improvisation on the plane after they had been gored, or, rang the bulls, and the whole thing. And it was hilarious, and we were laughing and having a great time. And then I remember when they called me, and my agent said, "You got the role." And I was like, "Huh?"
Wow.
She said, "You got the role." And I was like, "Okay." She goes, "Are you excited?" And I said, it's so clear in my brain. I said, "I don't know. Should I be? Is this a thing?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think it's a pretty big thing. It's a pretty big movie. And, but you don't have any reference points. So we'll be as excited as we can right now." And I was like, "Okay, sounds fun. Sounds like it's going to be fun." And it was an amazing, amazing experience. It was incredible. And my second audition was Star Trek, The Next Generation, the role I did on what was it called? First Duty. That was my second audition. And so it was just such a trip to enter.
Well, you're like batting 1,000 here, right?
Pardon? It was like batting 1,000.
I mean, that's pretty good. You try out for City Slickers, you get it, and then Star Trek, and you get it, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then my next film, as Bruno warned me, I'm out in the middle of that Italian Alps on this really low budget film. eating bread and cheese for lunch after being on this $100 million picture, and then at Paramount in this, iconic show, hanging out with these iconic makeup and hair people and touring the Star Trek archives with these incredible people. My mother's a Trekkie, grew up with the original Star Trek. She loves sci-fi. So I saw that as a kid. And so it was just like one of these interesting, experiences. But Bruno warned me, it's not always going to be like this. If you really choose this career, you're going to find yourself. We don't make as much money as everybody thinks. It may look like we do, but we've got agents, managers, PR people. We've got all this money we have to spend on our career.
Right.
And it's a lot. And I remember him saying this to me, God rest his soul. What an amazing human being he was. There's Walker. I drive a Maxima. I was like, a Maxima? What do you mean? And he goes, it's not a Mercedes. And I said, oh, I am driving Mercedes, and I just didn't have that thing either about cars. And he was like, yeah, I'd like a Mercedes. It was, he was a New Yorker, and this is a great guy. The stories I heard about, the industry, and one of my favorite films at that time, was Spinal Tap. I love that. It was so fun, comedy. It was so silly.
Yeah.
Spinal Tap, it's just, such a fun time. It was very innocent to go full circle on the innocence mat. And this is so important. We give ourselves this because when we allow ourselves to walk into a room as that innocent person, taking away all the labels we may have on it, let them come up in your mind when you have a meeting. Don't resist the labels. Let them come. Oh my God, this is an important meeting. Oh my gosh, I'm meeting this person. If they come up for you, whatever it may be, I got to nail this. I got to do this. Let all that stuff come up, but don't grip it. Don't hold it as being that important. Let it come up and let it flow through you and allow yourself that innocence you had as a kid to explore and discover something new. Because when you walk in and give yourself that freedom, allow those things to exist because they are part of your conditioning. They're part of what you've learned up to this point, but they're part of what you learned, which is here. Everything we go toward is out here, and it belongs in the unknown. It's in front of us. Our minds want us to grab all this and throw it in there because it makes us feel more comfortable because it's familiar. But remember the fun of being a child and the innocence of not knowing. When you're in discovery and you're the explorer and you allow yourself to think, and make it, play with that in your own mind. Let it all come up and go, well, that sounds good. And, I do know that, but I wonder what may happen that's different. I wonder if something new could come out of this. I wonder, and allow that wonder to be the first step through the door and watch how it changes everything. Something you never thought would happen, happens. Something new about that person you thought you knew. Something that you didn't know could happen in this exploratory meeting that you're having with your staff or your team. You're like, whoa, I didn't know that could happen. And that is what I'm talking about in my book when it's called Awaken, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence. That's what that light is. That's the light of your innocence. Shine it for yourself from the inside out first. And you will watch other people. They'll start because it's in our instinct. We don't need words around it. We feel it from somebody else, and there's something that's integral inside of us that recognizes that freedom, and it gives us permission, just like and she tapped into it. Marianne Williamson tapped into this years ago when she wrote that beautiful quote about giving people permission to shine their light too when you shine yours. It really is something that naturally happens as a result of us coming in with that energy. It promotes freedom. It promotes exploration and discovery, and it promotes our expansion and our growth. And it's exactly why we're here. So why not be the person that promotes that instead of something that we know that's, boring. We already know it, Put that squirrel suit on and jump off and fly a little bit and see what you don't know that you don't know.
So just be completely open-minded in any situation and see where it takes you, see what happens, see what you can learn.
Exactly. Even if you have a template, it's fine to have the template and allow for something to change. Allow for there to be an opportunity for a branch to go off in a direction you didn't know. I mean, one of an entrepreneur that he's one of my favorites to read about, and I love his mindset. He's also a dyslexic. Is Richard Branson. That's the way he functions. And he doesn't think of, failures. People look at failures. He doesn't think of them as failures. He was doing stuff at a really young age too, creating businesses, and they didn't fit well. He realizes now, that those were ones I didn't have passion around. And sometimes in our business, we put ourselves in such a pressure that we're supposed to have all the passion. No, we're supposed to surround ourselves with the people that can take and run with those passions that aren't ours. We have created the opportunity. We've created the space and the foundation. What a wonderful place to be as a entrepreneur, a boss, or whatever, the creator of that foundation, to be able to invite other people to stand on it with you and find their passion and build something that keeps surprising each other and allows people to feel that, full fulfillment that they're here to feel too, as a result of something you built, that not grasping that it is just yours, but maybe it's something that is meant to be for others too. And it's not just your identity. It's somebody else's that comes in too. And it becomes this beautiful, shared, passionate, growing thing that none of you really know exactly. It's like if you're looking at trees, there's all these different species. Generally that you're, in the cypress family, but you don't know how far it's going to grow. You don't know what every season's leaves are going to look like or how many there'll be. You don't know. And that's part of the excitement of being the builder of that foundation where other people can join you and be, one of the arms of that beautiful tree. And that's what I love about Richard Branson's mindset is he has never seen his dyslexia, as a disability, thereby. I just have had to work harder, especially in my business. I've had to work harder to memorize, to learn, to read, and I write things out. And I maybe have to, then somebody who has, an ability, it makes me have to read things a lot more than maybe an average person. But it wasn't.
Hasn't stopped you, that's for sure.
It hasn't stopped me because
you've accomplished a whole lot more than people who hadn't been labeled with something. I mean, that's for sure.
Well, and and that's something I have to give my mom kudos for is in her dysfunction. She grew up in a family that wouldn't allow, and part of that, that genre or that generation she grew up in, and that genre of thinking. People wanted to label me as a kid. They wanted to put me on Ritalin. Doctors wanted to put me on Ritalin because I was diagnosed with hyperactivity disorder, and then I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder, and I had all these things as a result of abuse. I had shingles, severe shingles at the age of 7, covering my whole back, which is a disease that typically gets elderly because of the aging and the stress on the body. But I was going through so much stress at that time. I had shingles. I had a really bad case of it. So I had all these diagnoses as a kid. But my mom, in her, the way she had been raised and the way they would push things away and everybody had to kind of fend for themselves in the family, she said, "You're not going to label my daughter. She's not going to be labeled. She's not going to be put on drugs." And so she won.
Good for her.
Thank God she did that.
Thank God. I know, because so many parents just go with the expert, quote unquote, and just get sucked into all that rabbit holes of
it is
whatever.
And it doesn't necessarily help the child. Some kids do need help and do need to be on something. They have legitimate issues with their functioning, and I think RFK is really showing the light on that too, and what causes some of that. And I've been watching that my whole life, as adult life, and agree with him on. There isn't a single thing that he's ever said that I don't agree with him, and I haven't seen evidence of.
I agree with you, and they love using conspiracy theorists and all that crap. And then he's like, "Okay, well, tell me what I said and show me where I was wrong." Nobody says anything.
No.
They shut up at that point.
No.
But yeah, I'm hoping he does. And I love the whole awaken idea. I fully agree. Go in with open mind. I've had so many meetings, I guess you could say, that I thought were a waste of time. Like, why are we doing this? And you go, and maybe a person, I know so-and-so that lives down in Florida, and that little piece of information right there, if you follow it in content, it could change your life, open up a whole new world for you just by kind of pursuing the unknown or going with it versus being stuck on a narrow path.
Yes. And, and often our mind will interrupt us in those moments and go, oh, well, that's not.
That's right.
Whenever the mind does that, oh, don't even, that's when you perk up and say, recognize the mind is a muscle, just like any other muscle. You can change the way your responses are. It's truly the only thing that you can, to some degree, control is our reactions if we practice wanting to know how the mind works. And how its number one facility is to be safe. That is not necessarily to our own betterment. Because being safe, as you know, as an entrepreneur, you wouldn't be an entrepreneur if you played it safe.
That's right.
And you have to know that when we all have that voice, we just have different levels of acuity when it comes to listening to it. And you can open that, you can develop a more connected listening to that voice by taking those moments when that voice says, well, something makes me want to call that person. Oh, come on.
That's right.
Not right.
It's funny. The opportunities just kind of slide in suddenly. It's like it could go by so quick.
Yeah.
But it's huge. It could be huge.
Yeah.
That's how it happens.
Yeah. And if you miss one and you go back and you see it, it's not a miss. It was an opportunity for you to recognize now, oh, that's what I should be listening to. It's not about, going backward and, shooting ourselves and
that's right.
And critiquing what didn't happen. It doesn't make any difference. It is what it is. You can't change it. So why not go towards the next? Well, then I'm open for the next opportunity. And when you do that, it's a invitation. I've done that. I have found myself doing that. Gosh, dang it. Especially in my work where I've had these opportunities come and things were happening in my personal life where I needed to focus on my family and I couldn't. And the mind was like, oh, that was such a good note. Okay, I got you. I hear it. But you know what? I wonder what the next one will be. And really put yourself in that, excited, engage the emotions, get that tickly feeling in your stomach, use your imagination. We all do it when we're kids. We pretend and we create this whole world. Do it for that second. I wonder what the next one will be. And it does something to the space around you. It sends out this invisible signal that, bring it on. There's something, and it shows up. I know you've experienced this.
The physical universe will align to those impulses that you're putting out. It does.
It does. Exactly. Yeah. And it's a simple awareness that we all have, that we can become our own, best parent, that we become our own best parent, our own best steward, our own best guide. And we open that door for ourselves. It's a beautiful experience. And that really, I think, is what this life is about. And why we came here is to experience that, not to be constantly going like this.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, listen, Walker, I hate it. I'm out of time, but this has been a fantastic conversation.
So much fun.
And it's so good. Kudos to all you've accomplished, all you've overcome. It's such an inspiration for everybody.
Thank you.
It's a testament to the human spirit that you could go through that kind of trauma, come out, achieve the success that you have, and just keep going with a positive attitude. It really does. I think everybody needs to hear it and get inspired by it.
Well, I give glory to God on that one, because I really do believe that me asking and just asking for help and allowing myself to not know what that would be has led me down this path. And there's just evidence that's showing that works. And I definitely follow the evidence. So that's another one of my own tenets is follow the evidence. And I've got some.
Yeah. Very good. Tell us again, what's the name of your book?
Awaken, Discovering Yourself Through the Light of Your Innocence.
All right. We'll post that here.
Yes. I still look forward to re-listening and my VA hearing this and creating some fun promos for this, because it's just been such a joy talking to you. And we went all over.
We did.
I feel like we've been on like this really fun like ride, and almost like a spaceship, exploring all these different areas. Like, and that's it, and it's just been a fun conversation and exploration. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, me too. Thank you too. It has been. I feel the same. All right, cool. Well, thanks, Walker. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It has been, I hope you've learned a lot and gotten inspired like I have. It's a tremendous story with a tremendous ending. Let me ask real quick, Walker, are you working on anything right now?
Well, whenever I'm working on something, I can't talk about it because we have to sign NDAs. But right now, what I've been working on recently is reorganizing my elements to re-enter the film and television side of the business. So that's really exciting, because it feels like it's the right time for me to have like-minded folks out there. That, in fact, I've just heard Pierce Brosnan is now working with Mel Gibson in creating a studio, and there's a lot going on in the industry that feels in alignment with just being more open-minded to people who want to have their own choice and not be told how you have to think. Not that I think that everything about, the woke is all of it horrible. I just think that we have no business telling each other how we're supposed to explore this world and this life, and that we need to be more open and allow ourselves to be who we are. And it's not cool to put people in boxes and label them and confine them and force them down a belief structure at any point in their life, much less children before they're even developed. So I'm excited to see this new emergence of more tolerance, more understanding, but also a very clear line. You're not going to tell me how to create, how to think, how to raise my kids, how to live my life in this kind of pressure cooker way that we've all been kind of exposed to, that has been one of the most intolerant environments I've ever seen in my own industry, but in the world. I've seen a lot of suffering the last 4 years, and our suicide rates jumped between ages 17 and 24 dramatically, and that says something, that there's something wasn't right. So I'm excited to re-enter into an environment where I feel like, there's more openness. Comedians can be comedians and they can say what they want. They're not going to be canceled. And
that's right.
I think it's important for us not to cancel each other. And that part of that whole mindset I don't like and I don't support. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also I work with Lisa Nichols. I coach in her community. And I love that. I love coaching speakers, and I love helping people tune into that light inside and open themselves up to the unknown discovery and grow into who they're meant to be. So I do that. I work in her community with her. Love that woman. She's a wonderful human being. And I started doing that during the period of the pandemic when I wasn't able to work in my industry because they were not open to people like me. So I'm grateful that the doors are opening and people are just starting to ease up and just become people again.
That's right.
Everybody.
That's right. That's a good way to say it. People becoming people again. It got so crazy. It got so crazy.
It got crazy.
Anyway.
It got crazy. Yeah. I can't imagine raising a child in the last this. I'm just glad our daughter's in her 30s. And mercy. Give us all some. Thank you.
There we go. That's right. All right, Walker. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for joining us for another Hines On Air. Remember to subscribe to the channel, comment below, and share this with your friends. And we'll see you at the next Hines On Air.
Hines On Air is for you. Remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review whenever you listen to podcasts. Your support helps us reach more people and continue sharing these incredible stories.